Cool. Thank you so much. So I'll start off with saying, you see it on the screen there, that is an original quote. I didn't steal that. That's not copyrighted. That's mine. That's what I always tell everyone who takes a class with me. When you learn about gun safety, not only do you increase your own safety, but that of everyone around you. Alec Baldwin knows very well about that. Okay, but for the purpose of this presentation, that doesn't just cover the gun safety rules, knowing how to operate your firearm, know when it's safe, finger off the trigger, those kind of things. That also goes into your behavior, how you conduct yourself, what you do with that gun, what you use it for, and how you use it. Okay, it's not just range rules. There's a lot more that goes into gun safety than just that. This is what we're going to cover here today. The course goal is to teach the knowledge, skills, and attitude necessary to successfully and safely navigate a non-consensual police encounter while legally carrying a concealed firearm. All right, so there's a difference between consensual and non-consensual encounters. The non-consensual encounter is typically initiated by a law enforcement officer, whereas the non-consensual one could be initiated by either one. It depends, but we're mostly talking about non-consensual encounters today. Now, before the Bruin decision, is everybody here familiar with the Bruin decision in the Supreme Court? That was in June of 2022, so about 2 years ago. There was a case that worked its way through the Supreme Court where part of what that decided was they threw out the good cause. Okay, so New York, as well as California and probably some other jurisdictions that I might not know, had a good cause. So when you applied for your CCW, you had to demonstrate that you personally were at greater risk of becoming the victim of a violent crime than the average population. That rule got thrown out. So now, before the Bruin decision, we had about 1,100 CCWs in the county. Now, 2 years later, we're approaching 20,000, okay? That's a 19,000, almost a 19,000 increase in 2 years. The Sheriff's Department is still processing about 700 a month, so that'll keep growing. And if we were to reach the national average, we should be at about 150,000, okay? So we're not even close to the national average yet. But the numbers will just grow and grow and grow. Now, I've talked to police officers, and I'll tell a couple of stories here in a minute. I might get ahead of myself, but I've been pulled over since then. And the police don't know that. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of police officers that I've spoken with, they don't know that. They still operate on the 1,100. That is 0.0366% of the population, approximately. Almost nobody. The chances for the police to encounter somebody who has a CCW is extremely small, right? And they still operate in large part on the 1,100 number. But we're 20,000 now, and we will be probably, if it keeps growing like that, 100,000 or more. So it's very important for the citizen, the CCW holder, to be aware of that. The police encounter somebody with a CCW, they're going to ask questions. They asked me a lot of questions. I'll get to that in a little bit. All right. We'll talk about what your goals are as a citizen. We'll talk about what the goals are of the police officer, how to begin the interaction and what the greatest dangers are. We'll talk about duty to inform, and we'll talk about what the officer could ask you to do, how to react to that, and how to comply with officers' orders. All right, so your objectives are pretty clear. You don't want to get a ticket. I'll use a traffic stop as an example because that's the most likely scenario we all are having a police interaction, especially a non-consensual one. If you're a law-abiding citizen, and assuming that we're talking about CCW holders, we're talking about law-abiding citizens. So you don't want to get a ticket, you don't want to get arrested, and you don't want to get shot. It's not necessarily in that order of importance, but those are your goals, right? Now, it's important to know that nobody's ever talked their way out of getting a ticket. If the officer decides they're going to give you a ticket, you're going to get a ticket. But, police officers, believe it or not, are people. So there's a couple of ways that you can make this easier for the officer. And what your job really is, when you're carrying and you have an encounter with a police officer, you want to make that, you need to help the police officer out. You want to make it as easy and as pleasant for the police officer that pulls you over. I know nobody wants to get pulled over, and if you don't have an experience getting pulled over, you might be nervous. It could be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially if it's your first time or depending on what you did. But you got to know that you did something. Okay, it doesn't happen that often that a police officer pulls you over in order to then find something on you. That doesn't happen that much, okay? So if you get pulled over, you know what you did. So my first advice to you is try to not get pulled over. Or let's say we're talking about other police encounters. Don't give the police or other law enforcement a reason to initiate a non-consensual encounter, okay? Don't go shoplifting, although chances in California are you're not going to get stopped for shoplifting. But, be the good guy so you don't get confronted by police. But with that being said, it's a first semester criminology type of thing. Punishment is not a deterrent, okay? Nobody commits a crime expecting that they'll get caught. Criminals only commit crimes when they think they'll get away with it. That goes for speeding, that goes for running stop signs. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're on an empty street and you have to wait 2 minutes for the light to turn green, you know there's nobody coming. Have you ever been tempted to just go on the red light? But you check if there's a cop around first, right? So if you don't see the cop, maybe you'll go. I'm not saying do it, but I know I've been tempted. But then if you get pulled over, you got pulled over because you didn't see the cop. You didn't cross the red light knowing that there was a cop, okay? So make sure you don't get pulled over in the first place. That sounds stupid, but that's the first piece of advice, of course. So now then, once you got pulled over, the officer, whoever it is, police, sheriff, CHP, they might want to correct a potentially dangerous situation, such as loose cargo, or your lights ain't working. You might be going on a flat tire that you're not aware of. I've seen plenty of people who are driving on flat tires. Your parking brake is on and the car is smoking in the back. Those could all be things why the officer is pulling you over. Then, of course, they can issue a traffic citation. Like I said, you were too fast, you ran a light, you ran a stop sign. If you've done any of those, you know you did it. All right? Nobody's surprised when they get pulled over after speeding. And then another one is that your car might match the description of a suspicious vehicle involved in some sort of an incident. Maybe they don't have a full license plate, they just know the make and model, and you're in the area that's relevant. There is a chance you get pulled over. In that case, you might really be scratching your head, okay? That might be one of those cases where you say, what the hell I do, you know? And if you approach that kind of situation with being upset and combative, then you're just asking for more scrutiny, okay? All right, so what are the greatest dangers when you do get pulled over? Nervous citizen, passenger, or officer, right? Traffic stops are not necessarily without danger for the police officers either, so they're going to be very cautious depending on the circumstances. Now, there are certain vehicles, vehicle types, and looks that are more prone to be possessed by questionable individuals, right? We know what street racers kind of cars looks like. Depending on the neighborhood you're in and the condition of your car, that might call for extra scrutiny, and the officer might approach you differently. So make sure your car is clean, your car is in good repair, and you don't have any, I don't know if that's a thing, but you don't have any gang bumper stickers on your car, gang symbols or whatever it might be, loud exhaust, tinted windows. And just so you know, if you ever get pulled over for tinted windows, you're not actually getting pulled over for tinted windows. Aus. Next one, unclear communication. Okay, I'll get into more detail later. Communication can happen in more ways than just verbal. Okay, communication could be body language. It could be signs, signals, hand signals, and gestures. Whistle, sounds. All those kind of things could play into here. Mostly we're talking about verbal and body language in this case. And then, of course, a misunderstanding. We all have heard about cases where somebody gets shot in the car, an unarmed person gets shot in the car, because the officer thought they were doing something that posed a threat to the officer. Okay? One example here is, so the officer is going to park the car a little off of yours, further into the roadway, for one, so that it creates a safety zone for the officer. If somebody crashes into the officer's car that's behind you, then the officer doesn't get hit right away by another car. But also it has something to do with where the dash cam is located, so the dash cam can get a good view of what's happening in front of the vehicle. Now the officer is most likely to come to your passenger, to your driver's side window, especially if you're if it's not too busy of a roadway. Now on the freeway, he might come around to the passenger side, so he's not in the road, less chance for the officer to get hit. But let's say he comes to your driver's side window. You see him in the rearview mirror, you have your hands on the wheel, you roll down your window, hopefully, and I'll get to that in a second later. The officer is going to talk to you through the window, and he or she has questions for you. If you talk to that officer out that side, there could be another officer on the other side. Now, most officers ride around by themselves, but every officer has to start somewhere, and there's a period where somebody has a rookie with them, or for whatever other reason they might team up that day, and the officer that's on that side has no idea what's going on in this window, okay? Especially if there's traffic noises, you could be talking to this officer and telling him you're reaching for your wallet, and the other officer sees your gun being exposed as you do this, reaching for the wallet, and he'll put a bullet behind your ear. So that's an example of unclear communication because the other officer doesn't know what you're talking about, okay? So how do you begin the interaction? I got a little bit ahead of myself there. And again, we're assuming a traffic stop here. There are other scenarios where you might have a non-consensual encounter, but this is the most likely scenario for the majority of us. You want to keep everybody calm. Even the passengers, okay? You, the driver, you're the one that got pulled over. You did something, so the ticket is going to go to you. But who knows what past interactions your passengers have had with police. They might not be friendly to police. They might be nervous. Maybe they know they have a warrant out, and they're now concerned. I'm not, making assumptions of who you hang out with, but I also Uber on the side. So I have lots of strangers in the car. I don't get pulled over a lot. I rarely ever get pulled over, but I have been pulled over. Not while I was Ubering, but you have somebody in the car. Let's say what I learned is if somebody has an ankle bracelet, you might not know that, but if they have an ankle bracelet and the police find out about that, they can then search your car even without your consent. I learned that from somebody that was in that situation. So you want to make sure that everybody stays calm, right? Be reassuring. I got pulled over. This is my ticket. Keep your hands on the dash or on the seat in front of you, whatever. Just make sure the officer can see your hands. Don't make any sudden movements. Don't say anything. I'll do all the talking. Just make sure everybody stays calm and they don't act suspicious. All right. Now you want to, like I said before, you want to make this as easy and as calm as possible for the officer, right? Because the officer has all sorts of thoughts. What happens if this? What happens if that? They have to look at everyone in the car and keep their eyes on everybody's hands and make sure the interaction goes well. You want to make sure the officer is reassured that you're not a bad guy. Nothing bad is going to happen in this interaction. So you turn off the engine, right? Out here, it's not that cold, but in a colder climate, you can see the steam coming out of the stovepipe back there, the exhaust pipe, I mean. If that stops, the officer can see right away you turn off the engine. As they come closer to the car, depending on the traffic noise, they might be able to hear your car is off. There's no chance you're running. You're giving the officer all the cues that they want to see that you're going to be cooperative and you have an inclination to, say, obedience. If it's at night, turn on the dome light in the car. The officer can see everybody. The officer knows right away there's nobody hiding anything. This person is going to be cooperative. Be cooperative. Hi. So then you want to keep your hands on the steering wheel. The officer should be able to see your hands at all times because that's what they're looking for. And it's just reassuring for the officer because you know there's no danger coming from you. But the officer doesn't know that, okay? For you, the CCW holder, the danger comes from the officer misinterpreting things that you're doing. All right, let's talk about duty to inform. California does not have a duty to inform. There's a lot of jurisdictions that don't have a duty to inform, and in most jurisdictions, simply handing over your CCW together with your driver's license and your proof of insurance counts as informing the officer. I think in Michigan you actually have to say it. There might be some other jurisdictions, but in California you don't have to tell the officer. I had a case where somebody called me up and they said they needed a firearm safety class, just a regular firearm safety class, no shooting, no marksmanship, just safety. And experience has taught me whenever that's the case, I always should ask, hey, is this court ordered? And 9 out of 10 times it's court ordered. So this young lady came from Arizona. In Arizona, they have a duty to inform. She was crossing the border in California, and right behind the border, she got pulled over for speeding. And she thought she's doing the right thing and told the officer, hey, I just want to let you know there's a gun in the car. This location, whatever. And the officer said, okay, well, is it yours? No, it's my boyfriend's gun. So now she made a really big mistake. Had she not said anything, right, the officer would have not known. The officer would have probably not even asked. Nothing would have happened. So that was on a Friday. And she was really, really lucky that she was a young, attractive female and the officer was a man. So he took the gun and gave her some sort of a ticket, a misdemeanor ticket. She could have spent the weekend in jail. But she got really lucky. And then the court said, well, do this class, show us proof that you did it, and then we'll drop it. And she even got the gun back, or her boyfriend got the gun back. But just be aware, in Arizona there is a duty to inform, here there isn't. You don't have to say anything, okay? However, after you get pulled over, before the officer comes to the car, they'll run your plate. And they'll know if the plate is registered to a person who is a CCW holder. Because the DMV is tied in with the Sheriff's Department, who is the issuing authority here. The same thing happens when they run your ID. So the officer already knows the car is registered to a person that has a CCW. Doesn't mean that that person is driving the car at the moment, but the officer already has made a mental note. Then they come to the car, they see your driver's license, and it matches the registration. So then they know there is a good chance that you have a gun in the car, or more. Because why would you get a CCW if you don't carry it, right? I hope you all, if you have CCWs, you all carry all the time, I hope. So the officer knows. You don't have to say anything, but there is a good chance the officer will ask you. So I got in one of those situations where I got pulled over for tinted windows. So you know I got not pulled over for tinted windows. The first officer came to the window, did all the stuff. The second officer came to the other window and said, hey, are there any guns in the car? Oh, sorry. No, he said, are there any weapons in the car? To which I replied, sneaky as I am, "Can you define weapon for me?" And he looked a little bit puzzled and he said, "Well, firearms." So that means I was off the hook with all the knives I got scattered about everywhere. I got one in the door handle, I had a Swiss Army knife, there's a K-bar in the glove box. There's a lot of knives in my car. But he said firearms, so I was off the hook with the knives. And I said, and I want you to write this down. If you get into the situation, you are better off informing the officer ahead of time because they'll know it anyways, right? So you let the officer know when they come to the window, you have your hands on the wheel, and you say, "Officer, I know there's no duty to inform, but out of courtesy, I would like to let you know I have a CCW, I'm lawfully carrying such and such a gun, it is on my appendix right now, or wherever you have it. How would you like me to proceed?" And then you wait for the orders of the officer, okay? Write that down and memorize that phrase. "I know there's no duty to inform, but out of courtesy, I'd like to let you know I have a CCW and I'm lawfully carrying right now whatever it is, wherever it is. How would you like me to proceed?" Most of the time, in my experience, the handful of times that I got pulled over, the officers will be very appreciative and they might not even want to see it. They don't care about it. One officer told me, and I'm trying to say it exactly the way he said it, "Good for you, I don't care." Another one told me, "You don't reach for yours, I won't reach for mine." I said, "Deal." Okay, so if you be upfront, you make it easy for the officer. You want to make the officer as calm, as secure, as safe as possible, and they'll appreciate that you do that for them. Okay, so your job is to help the officer through the traffic stop, not the other way around. Your CCW may have some restrictions added to it. I don't see that a lot, but it's possible that the issuing authority adds restrictions to it. Now for California, I've never seen it, but I've had CCWs in another state, and depending on what you say you want it for, we don't have good cause anymore, so probably that's not a thing anymore, but there may be CCWs out there that have restrictions. Make sure you know what those are, okay? You don't want to carry in a situation where you're not supposed to. All right, so if the officer comes to the window, you don't have your ID and everything ready, there is a very good way for you to present your CCW and your other credentials. That's why we have these around here. There's lanyards, giveaways later. But what I always encourage everybody is to not have your credentials in your wallet or in a place that where you would reach it with your hands disappearing from the officer's view, okay? So I had to take this off earlier so it doesn't interfere with the mic. But I always have this on under my shirt so that if the officer asks me for any of my credentials, I can just slowly, I will inform the officer where it is and what I'm about to do, and then my hands will stay in the officer's view. As I'm reaching for this, I pull this out of my shirt, and here are all my credentials: my driver's license, my USCCA card, my CCW. And if you have your insurance cards, you can laminate those. They fit in here as well. That's one of those situations where you have a nervous rookie cop, your hands disappear from view, you unclick your seatbelt, you reach for your wallet, that kind of stuff. That's potentially a situation that can cause a misunderstanding followed by a bad outcome for everybody. Okay? So it's easier if you're able to keep your hands within view of whoever pulled you over. In the unlikely case that the officer would like to have your gun, that is a very unlikely case, okay? They'll ask you to get out of the vehicle. Get out of the vehicle. You know what you did. You can't argue your way out of getting a ticket. If you have any grievances whatsoever, settle that in court later. Collect a check at the end, okay? Even if you think you're 100% sure you didn't do anything wrong, at that point is not the time to argue with the officer. Just do whatever they say. If you are, let's say, a First or Second Amendment auditor and you have a YouTube channel, do what you need to do to get your views, but I would discourage you from trying that when you carry, okay? If you don't carry, do what you must do. If you choose to insist on exercising all your rights, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, just be sure that you will receive extra scrutiny, okay? So if you choose to exercise your rights to the fullest extent, make sure you know your rights to the fullest extent and you don't do anything that later turns out you were in the wrong, because then you won't collect the check, okay? So let's say the officer is asking you to step out the vehicle. Again, if you haven't told the officer yet, you don't have to. And if they didn't ask, they didn't ask. But if the officer doesn't know at this point that you have a gun on you, let them know before you get out of the car. Because if there's any reason that they want to feel like patting you down at this point, that's going to look really bad, okay? And the officer is going to get really jumpy. Ask the officer, again, for instructions. Officer, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't told them, I have a firearm on me, it's at this location, whatever. How would you like me to proceed? If the officer asks you, and I hope they won't, they probably have the training not to, if they ask you to hand over the gun, don't hand them the gun. Don't touch a firearm in the presence of a police officer, even if they told you to do so. Instead, let the officer know that you don't think that is the safest course of action and you would prefer that the officer take it. My firearm is on my hip, right, left, whatever. The gun is on my right hip. I prefer you safely take the firearm from me. Okay? You let the officer know that you don't want to touch a gun in front of a police officer. Again, unbuckling your seatbelt, reaching for your wallet, doing any type of motion, reaching for the glove box. Anytime your hands disappear from the officer's view, that's a potential misunderstanding, okay? Oops.
Push play at the top.
There we go. All right, so your job is to help the officer through the traffic stop or whatever other situation it might be that caused the interaction. If you make it easy for the officer will be very appreciative. I told you about the time where I got pulled over for the tinted windows. The officer asked me, are there any weapons in the car? I said, define weapon for me, blah, blah, blah. The other guy came back to the window then and said, sort of in an accusatory tone, so how come you have a CCW? How come you're carrying? What do you need it for? Why do you have it? What's your deal? Again, the police is still operating in large part thinking there's only 1,100 CCWs. They're not up to date as we are because this is our cause. This is what we're interested in. So I don't know if they have that type of training, if they keep up to date with that. They're going to see that more and more. We're near 20,000 CCWs in the county now. In that case, I did not insist of pleading the fifth, whatever. I got pulled over for the tinted windows. Sure, my windows are tinted. But I told the guy what I do for a living. I'm a firearms instructor. I applied at such and such date before the good cause, and I asked him if he knew. And he didn't know the number of CCWs we have in the county. So I encouraged him, you know, officer, I'd love for you to have this conversation at the department with everybody there. Make sure they know, because you're going to see this much, much more. This will be a thing. And with that, I think I'll open it up for questions. Yes?
Hold on.
Oh.
I know, but we're recording this for the online community, so it's for them.
Again, police officers are people too. You know, they have emotions, they have fears and concerns. If you make it easy for them, they'll appreciate you. By the way, I did not get the ticket that day.
Good for you. Okay, well, I guess, is it working?
Yeah, so it's not going to amplify your voice, it's just recording your
Gotcha.
voice.
Okay, well, question is I know you said as far as there is not a duty to inform, I thought I had read and had heard that in certain counties within California that you're obligated to inform. I know San Diego is not one of those, but I know that there's different counties throughout California that you are obligated. At least that's what I've heard and read.
I
Question on that.
don't know if that's a thing. Gary, can you answer that?
They might try it, but it's inconsistent with California. They might try that, but it's inconsistent with California law, and the county can't put restrictions on you that aren't consistent with California law. So theoretically, they could do it, but whether it'll survive, I don't know.
And by the way, thank you for that question. So if you choose not to inform, right, and then the officer asks you, and you choose to remain silent, and you say, I want to exercise plead the fifth, I don't answer questions, that's okay. But you're going to receive more scrutiny, okay? Because the officer knows that you have a CCW. They don't know if you have a firearm on you at that moment, but they know you have a CCW.
Yeah, I think I had a friend that got one up, and I believe that Orange County is one of those counties that they were instructed her that you were required to inform there. I know San Diego's not, and I had read there were several, through one of the publications I'd read that I thought there were several other counties where they require, and I don't know if it's other people and how that would work if somebody's from San Diego were not required, but were somewhere else, because it's hard to know with all the different counties.
That's a good question. So I know there is, let me back up. Coming from Germany, Germany is a federal republic. It's also we have federalism in Germany. The American level of federalism goes way beyond what we have in Germany. And I'm not a fan, because you have your federal law, you have state law. Same in Germany. But then you have counties and cities and municipalities that can issue their own ordinances. Now, you as a gun owner traveling through the state or even interstate travel, it's your responsibility to know all those, right? Remember in the old days when you had MapQuest, you print out the directions, you study map real quick, you read up the first 5 ahead, and then you have to go somewhere. Before we had GPS, and then you get to a road closure, and you can throw those away, because you have to take a different way. Now, if you're traveling through 5 counties and you read all of the laws that pertain to every county, you're supposed to know those. I think, this is personal opinion, I think it's unreasonable to expect every citizen to know all of those. There's just too many. I don't know how many cities I'm going through. I plug it in from here to Oregon, and I just go wherever she tells me, right? It's on mine, it's a woman's voice, because I'm programmed to, whenever a woman tells me to, just do it. You're supposed to know those, but I think it's unreasonable. And if you encounter any of those, then see if you can fight it in court. If, like Gary said, if it's not consistent with state law, maybe you'll win. But I encourage you, especially as a firearms owner, if you do carry, to make sure you know as many of the different city ordinances where you travel through, or don't get out of the car until you get there. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. Other questions? Well, you've earned yourself one of these, so you can present your CCW and your license. If and when you get pulled over, but don't get pulled over. I'm just kidding. I actually have one for everybody. Yes?
Could you clarify, your lecture is based on...
Oh, yeah, wait for the mic.
Sorry. For the online community, they can hear what you're saying. Thank you.
So your lecture is based on non-consensual encounter. Can you differentiate a consensual encounter as opposed to a non-consensual encounter?
Sure.
You mentioned traffic stop. That's an example.
Usually a non-consensual
That's right.
encounter.
You're being
because
stopped.
You don't want to get pulled over, but the cop insists.
Right.
A non-consensual encounter could be one where you are the one calling 911 to report a crime, and then they come and take a statement from you. Anytime that you initiate an encounter with police. It could be as simple as you meet a cop on the street and you ask for directions, right? In that case, the cop isn't running any of your credentials. They don't know who you are unless you identify yourself, so they wouldn't know that you have a CCW. You don't have to say anything. Again, duty to inform. You don't. I had an example for, I got hit by a drunk driver. I was at a stop sign, I wasn't even moving. So even if he wasn't drunk, it would have been a clear case, but the guy basically fell out of his car, wasn't able to speak. And I called 911. They came and picked him up. They did the sobriety test. Basically, by looking at him, he failed. And the dispatcher asked me on the phone, are there any weapons involved? Meaning the other guy. Does the other person, the other party have any weapons on them? Any weapons observed or visible? And I said, no, but I'm a CCW holder and I'm carrying. And they asked me on the phone, okay, by the time the cops show up, please make sure you put it away, put it in the trunk, whatever. But then I had to deal with that, and I actually forgot to do it. So when the police showed up, they knew I had a CCW. The officer approached me and they said, hey, I heard you have a permit. Where's your firearm? And I was like, ah, dang it, I forgot. And instinctively, when somebody asks you, where's your gun, you want to make a motion. You know, I had to focus really hard not to do that. But I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I had to deal with this, and I forgot. And the officer said, all right, that's fine. Just leave it where it is. And that was that. So they're usually very appreciative. The one thing I want to say is, us CCW holders, and I'm not sure here how many have a CCW, you don't have to say, but in the one thing, I'm a fan of constitutional carry. I don't think anybody should ever have to, I don't think possession in and of itself should ever, under any circumstances, for anyone, I have an extreme point of view on that, be illegal. I don't think possession should ever be illegal for anyone. For minors, for felons, for illegal immigrants, possession in and of itself should not be illegal. That's my opinion. Now, you can use a firearm criminally, right? Robbery is already illegal. Rape and murder is already illegal, especially if you use a gun to commit those crimes. That's illegal. The one good thing that comes out of requiring us to have a CCW, again, I would prefer constitutional carry, but the one good thing that comes out of having a CCW is you get very thoroughly criminally vetted before you get it, before it's issued. Every single police interaction that you have ever had gets scrutinized, even if you're the one calling 911. So the police know when they show up, if you have a CCW, that you are a law-abiding citizen. On average, we hear this a lot, on average, CCW holders commit less crime than police officers. Because it's so easy to lose it. A DUI and it's gone, right? Domestic violence, it's gone. And it's gone before they look into the details of the case, if it's justified accusation or not. It's gone. So we do everything we can to protect our CCWs, to keep it, because we value them so highly. So when the officer shows up and you tell them, I would like to inform you, I have a CCW, I'm lawfully carrying, this is where it's at, how would you like me to proceed? Their anxiety is going way down. They know you're the good guy, and in my experience, more often than not, you will probably not even get the ticket, depending on the infraction, whatever it was. So the fact that you have a CCW is already very reassuring to the police officer, and your chances of that encounter going well are going up, okay?
Yep, sorry, we have to cut it off there.
All right. I'll hand out these, grab your lanyards.